It was to end the human suffering that the Buddha preached the world for 45 years. The word he used to indicate suffering is dukkha, but that word dukkha has a wider meaning than suffering, but suffering itself is a very important aspect of the dukkha. In his very first discourse called Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, he referred to the ending of suffering as dukkha nirodha. Dukkha is suffering, translated in English, and nirodha is ending. In that sermon, he identified dukkha, in short, as our thinking, our thoughts. Thinking means creation of thoughts, creation of mental images by thinking. It is because we think that we suffer. That is the finding of the Buddha that he revealed at the first sermon. In his own words called Pali, he said, Sankittena panja upadanakkhandhapi dukkha. He gave several examples to denote what suffering is, to explain what suffering is, giving examples. For example, he said, Jatvi dukkha, birth is also suffering. Jarapi dukkha, decay, becoming old, that's suffering. Vyadhipi dukkha, getting sick, is also suffering. Maranampi dukkha, even death is suffering. And thereafter lamenting and worrying about and being sorry for somebody's death, they are also suffering. The scientific meaning of the word dukkha is transformation, changing, mutation. Dukkha means in the bad way, ka means degenerating. Whatever that is generated is subject to degeneration. But in his first sermon, as I mentioned earlier, he said, our mental suffering is based on our thinking. We think of things that we like, we think of things that we dislike, and we think of things that we do not know, that we are ignorant of. Therefore, suffering is based on thinking, thinking is based on likes, dislikes, and ignorance, and so on. Ignorance is based on being not enlightened. This shows we are living in a causative world. Every event is the effect of a cause. And at the same time, every cause is the effect of some other cause. That is what the Buddha referred to in his Paticcasamuppada principle called Paticcasamuppada, translated into English as dependent originations. Things originate depending on something else. In that dependent origination called Paticcasamuppada, he said, and not only in that, in his very first sermon, he said, Tanha, the thirst for pleasure, the thirst for happiness, the thirst for enjoyment, that is thirst. Thirst is the cause of all our suffering. His suffering is explained in short as our thinking. We think of things that we like, we dislike, and that we do not know, as I mentioned earlier. And thinking is based on our search for happiness, bliss, ending of suffering. All our sense organs need basically satisfaction. We have to satisfy our eyes by giving beautiful sceneries, beautiful things to see. We have to please our eye, satisfy our ear by giving objects that he can hear pleasantly, that gives happiness. Similarly, we have to please our nose, please our tongue, please our body, please our mind. That means throughout our life, we are searching for pleasures to please our sense organs. Therefore, in the dependent origination, as I mentioned earlier, Patissampada, Buddha said, although he said, Tanha, the thirst for pleasure, is the cause of suffering, dukkha samudaya, dukkha is the suffering, in the first sermon he said, and dukkha samudaya, he said, the birth of suffering. And at the same time he said, dukkha nirodha, ending of suffering. And other truth he spoke of was the technique of ending suffering, dukkha nirodha gamani patipada. In his very first sermon, he spoke of the Four Noble Truths. The four acceptable noble. Here, noble means it is by the realization of these four truths that one can get enlightened. Therefore, they are called noble truths. And all those four truths are based on the main truth called dukkha, the suffering. And main purpose, as I mentioned at the beginning, of Buddha's teaching was to end human suffering. And in the dependent origination, although in the first sermon it says suffering is caused by tanha, the thirst, that tanha, the thirst for happiness, pleasure, enjoyment, is dependent on our sensation. Sense organs become aware of things. And sense organs are always searching for happiness, for satisfaction. And that searching for pleasure, enjoyment, delight, happiness is sensory pleasures dependent on the availability of the sense organ. It is because there are sense organs that we get sensation. It is because of sensation we get the feeling of thirst. The mind gets heated when sense organs come in contact with sensory objects. Through the contact with the electrons of the sensory objects. For example, our eye gets contact with light waves. Light waves contain electrons. And our eye is made of atoms, and around every atom there are electrons revolving. When these electrons meet together, there will be electrical charge, that is called electrical heat. It is because of this heat that we get the thirst for happiness. In fact, the Pali word tanha used by Buddha originated in the Sanskrit word called Trishna. The original meaning of the Trishna is thirst. Buddha used it for mental thirst. Mental thirst means the desire for sense satisfaction. And as I mentioned earlier, suffering is caused by tanha, mental thirst. Mental thirst is caused by heating of the sense organs, heating of the mind. Heating of the mind is caused by contact with sensory objects. Contact is made possible by the presence of sense organs. Sense organs are there because there is a body, and that body can contact other objects because the body is alive. That means alive means the body is having a mind. The dead body has no mind. The living body has a mind. Therefore, he said nama rupa. The body, the mind, the body and the mind are in the other cause. Thus going on, ending of suffering is possible only with the ending of cause of suffering, but there is series of cause. The immediate cause Buddha referred to as tanha, the thirst for happiness, but he defined it in the same discourse called Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra, mentioning the three aspects of that thirst. They are kama tanha, bhava tanha, bhava tanha in his words. Kama means pleasant sensory objects, desire for pleasant objects for the sense to enjoy. And another aspect is the positive aspect. Everybody has a particular taste of different sensory objects. For example, you may like a cup of tea. You may like it with milk. Some other may like it without milk. You may like it with sugar. Some may like it without sugar. And so on. We have different tastes. One may like blue color, another may like pink color, another may red color, another yellow color, and so on. We have different tastes. And searching for objects of one's own taste is called bhava tanha. Bhava means to happen, manifest. We want to manifest what we like. For example, when you want a cup of tea, you may like it hot. Then that means your taste is hot. Another may like it cool. Another may like it warm, and so on. Therefore, searching for things of our taste. In our searching for, we reject things that are not of our ideal, not of our taste. That is rejection. Therefore, in search, there is rejection and acceptance. Rejection, that is the negative way. Accepting, there is a positive way. Likes means we accept things that we like. We reject things that we dislike. These are mental activities that lead to our suffering. In the Buddha's explanation, although tanha is the immediate cause of suffering, tanha gets activated in different stages. Tanha is the readiness to grab something of some sensory pleasure, or to grab something that is harmful to sensory pleasure, so that that object is grabbed to throw it away, to reject it. Hold on or to reject it. Accepting means holding on to. That is what we like. we reject what we dislike. In both cases, we have to hold on to things that we like or dislike. To throw away, we have to hold something. To get something, we have to hold something. The capacity to hold is what is referred to as tanha. We have the capacity to hold on to things, either to keep or either to reject, either get rid of it. There is positive grasping and negative grasping, which has a particular purpose. And Buddha said, grasping leads to our likes and dislikes, and ultimately we suffer due to our thinking, sankitena panchapadanatkam labhadikka, and as mentioned earlier, we think of things that we like, we think of things that we dislike. Therefore, the thinking that leads to suffering is based on our likes and dislikes, and our likes and dislikes are based on the mental readiness to grasp, called tanha in Pali. The initial grasping is referred to in Pali as rati, the first time grasping it, holding on to something. Then it develops into raga. Tanha is the capacity, readiness. Then first activity, grasping, rati. Then grasping again and again, holding on, touching again and again. That is called raga. Continuing the grasp, that's called raga. That happens in the present moment of things, sensory objects. But when something is present, we want it to continue in the unborn future also. That means we are grasping, we are pulling the future into the present. Thinking of the unborn future means pulling it to the present moment. And that's called tanha, the greed in Pali. And so on, the thirst for pleasure develops in our mind and lead to an ocean of thinking, a torrential flood of thoughts process start because of our thinking. And Buddha said, if you want to be enlightened, we had to eradicate. Enlightenment was referred as the ending of suffering. To end suffering, we had to end the cause of suffering. The cause of suffering, he said, the initial capacity for desire. Maybe positive desire or negative desire. But on the other hand, Bible gives a different view. Buddha's view is for the spiritual development. The Bible gives another advice for material development. In the Sermon on the Mountain, Bible says, I am reading para 7 of Matthew in the New Testament. Ask, and you will receive. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks will receive, and anyone who seeks will find, and the door will be open to him who knocks. That means we have to make effort. Ask. That means desire to get something. We must have a desire. The thirst for things get activated by way of asking for it. And seek, activated by way of seeking for what we want, what we like. And when you seek, we have to knock at the door to get it open. Knock at the door. All these activities are needed for our material progress, development, material achievement. It is because we have a thirst for pleasure, thirst for happiness, the desire, the tanha that human race invented, discovered, so many luxuries, so many comforts. The entire scientific progress is dependent on our desires. Therefore, desire is the basis of material prosperity, material success, material achievement. The spiritual success, spiritual development, spiritual progress depends on a direction opposite to the direction in the material success. No more tanha. The enlightenment is called tanhakaya, cessation of thirst for pleasure. As long as there is any aim, any desire, any thirst for something, for some object, one cannot get enlightened. Because enlightenment is referred to as tanhakaya, means cessation or the extinction of all desires. When desires get extinct, there will be an empty mind because there won't be any more thinking in that mind. Because we think of things that we like. We think of things that we dislike. Dependent because we dislike comparable to what we like. Therefore, that is the negative aspect of liking. Liking, disliking. And all that is dependent on ignorance. Through liking we get attached to things. Through disliking we resent things. Both happen due to our ignorance of the reality of things. Enlightenment means the dispelling of the darkness called ignorance. Metaphorically, ignorance is referred to as darkness. Enlightenment means you can see things as they really are. The futility of what we seek, what we reject, what we want to get, what we want to get rid of. Through our thinking. Or else it is through ignorance, but because knowledge contains nothing but ignorance. Because our knowledge is imperfect. We do not know the reality of anything because all our knowledge is dependent on our sensory experiences and no sense organs is capable of knowing the truth or the reality of anything. Therefore, our knowledge is based on the imperfect information given by our sense organs. Therefore, our knowledge is not real knowledge, it is really ignorance. It is due to ignorance we like things and dislike things. Enlightenment means the cessation of likes, dislikes and ignorance. Liking that leads to attachment is called raga. Disliking that leads to resentment is called dosa, and the ignorance is called moha. Nirvana is called ragakaya, dosakaya, mohakaya. Meaning cessation of attachment to things called raga, then cessation of resenting things. Attachment, resentment and ignorance. Cessation of these three mental elements, functions lead to enlightenment. Enlightenment is referred to by the Buddha as the ending of thinking in its very first paean of joy recorded in the Jaravagava Dhammapada, Visankaragatan Chitta. At the enlightenment, thinking ceased, cessation of thinking. Because the causes of thinking get eradicated at the enlightenment. The causes are liking, disliking, and ignorance. Attachment, resentment, and ignorance. Called raga, dosa, moha in Pali. Thus, the raga, as I mentioned earlier, is caused by we get attached to things after experience the first holding on. Raga is preceded by rati in Pali. Raga is attachment. Attachment is preceded by the contact, the first contact. When the first contact is present, we get attached to it. Then rati leads to raga. And contact is dependent on our capacity to contact. Capacity to absorb. The thirst, mental thirst to grasp something. There is trishna, tanha. Therefore, tanha, rati and raga. They are identified in the Buddha's life story as three lady damsels, heavenly damsels, the daughters of the Mara, the devil, who came to the Buddha in the fifth week after his enlightenment to entice him with sensory sexual pleasures. But Buddha could not be enticed by their sexual exhibitions. That is referred to in the Buddha's life story. And these three, tanha, rati and raga, refer to the cause and effect. The Buddha in his first sermon, as I mentioned earlier, mentioned tanha, the initial desire, the capacity for desire, as the cause of suffering, and he explained, as I mentioned earlier, our thinking. Our thinking is based on our capacity for desire, positive, negative, and neutral. Positive things means we desire to get things. Negative thing desire means we desire to get rid of things that we dislike. Neutral thing, we are neither interested, nor we like, nor we dislike. That is the neutral method. But all are based on our capacity to grasp, capacity to contact. First contact, capacity, we have the capacity, readiness to contact is called tanha. The first contact is called rati. The continuation of the contact is called raga. And leading the contact into pulling from the future is called lobha, extinction. This shows all activities in the human this world, all events are causative. Every event, every happening, every incident has a cause. And that cause can be the effect of some other cause. And the present effect, called the event, may cause some other event. Therefore, we are living in a causative world, and Buddha said, even I myself cannot see the ultimate cause of our existence, our living, our grasping, our existence. Anamataggo I am samsaro. I have been moving from life to life, but I myself cannot see the beginning of that motion, movement from life to life in the existence. That means we cannot think of the first cause of suffering, but That means suffering is intrinsic nature of the world in which you live. And it was Buddha who preached the technique of ending suffering, saying, we suffer mentally because of our thinking. We think of things that we like, dislike, or are ignorant of. Therefore, when we end the desire for happiness, the thirst for happiness, tanha, the cause for thinking, the thinking ceases, and that is enlightenment. Therefore, enlightenment is the cessation of the ultimate cause of suffering, or the immediate cause of suffering, so that nothing can disturb that supreme bliss one would achieve at the enlightenment.